So check this out. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys a starter kit so you can start oil painting. Now, I know oil painting has this reputation of being overbearing and there's so much to learn and it's so different than a lot of the other mediums. Yes, it is different than a lot of the other mediums. However, it's not as bad and complex as a lot of you think. So don't feel intimidated. Don't let it defeat your confidence. Oil paint is definitely one of the best mediums to work with. And right now, I'm going to give you guys a simple starter kit so that you can start oil painting. Now, before we get into that video, like, subscribe. Matter of fact, I'll give you a second to do that. All right, let's get into it. Now, first thing first, let's talk about safety. Whenever you're working with oil paints, you always want to be wearing gloves. You do not take them off unless you're going to take a break for a while or unless you're done your painting session for that day. Also, Gamsol. Gamsol is an odorless mineral spirits. It's a lot less toxic than turpentine, which is what's traditionally used. I've been using this since I've been oil painting, since I started oil painting. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. It operates just fine and just like how turpentine would. Now back to the gloves. I got these for about $20. There's about 200 of them. As you see, there's a little pull pouch type of thing right here that you can just pull the gloves out of. So first and foremost, safety. These two things, very important. This, the most important of all. Now, I'm not going to get into all the different uses of the items I'm going to be showing you. However, I think it's very important to point out some of the uses with Gamsol and why I recommend that you get your hands on the biggest bottle of it that you can. Now, Gamsol, you're going to use this to clean your brushes. You're also going to use it to wipe down your palette. And you're also going to use it as your first layers to do your washes. So, Gamsol, very important. Get the biggest that you can, and it's also more cost effective when you buy bigger. Next up, let's talk about paint. What paint should you get? Well, I have a bunch of paints right here. And when it comes to paints, what I recommend is that you follow what you see on the paint wheel. Now, most people will tell you just get the primaries, just get the earth tone, and get titanium white. However, it's very important that you also include your cyan, which is your turquoise or cobalt teal, and you also include a magenta. The reason why, as I showed in my previous video, which you can watch here, when you mix certain colors, you're not going to get the same results. So mixing a color to get purple, you would think, okay, I just mix a blue and a red, so I can mix any cadmium red, any ultramarine blue, it's going to give me purple. No, it's not, because they have different qualities within the paint, different tinting and mixing qualities. However, if you use your magenta and ultramarine blue, it will give you purple every time. If you use your cyan and your magenta, it will give you purple also. So that's why I throw these in also along with the primary colors and the earth tone. Now, as you can see here, I have mostly Gamblin paints, which is the main brand that I use, but I also have some Winsor & Newton. Now, I pretty much bought these because they were 60% off at Michael's, and you can't beat a deal like that. So I paid way less than usual. Anyways, not important for you guys. This big tube of white is important to get it in this size or bigger if you can. Now you see that's 200 ml. The others are 150, these are 37. White is one of the colors that you're gonna be using the most. So get your hands on the biggest tube of white that you can. Now also with the paints that I should mention is that these can be pretty pricey for some people, I understand. However, if you're just starting out, you're under a budget, go ahead and get you some student grade paints. These right here are the 1980s from Gamblin. These are their student grade. I have a few colors in the student grade. Those are gonna cost you significantly less. This right here, the turquoise, I think it costs about $9 or so. Whereas the cobalt teal, it's about 25, and they're the same size. Different name, but very similar color. So the mediums that I would recommend, we already talked about this a bit. So we're gonna put Gamsol in there. Now Gamsol, that's what you're gonna use to thin your paints. Usually when you're first starting off, you wanna tone the canvas, or you wanna sketch out your drawing on the canvas, or do an underpainting. A lot of artists, including myself, we use the Gamsol to thin out our paints. The next that I'm gonna talk about is Stan Oil. Now this is a very slow drying medium. You can dilute it a bit with some Gamsol and it'll speed it up a bit and make it a bit thinner. However, I wouldn't recommend this for beginners because there is a sort of recipe you gotta put together when you're following the fat over lean rule, and that can add a whole bunch of other complications or for you to feel intimidated when you're getting into the paint. So keep it simple. Don't start off with the Stan Oil. Get the Gamsol. But to absolutely use a medium, get yourself some Liquin. Now, this is just Liquin that I put in my own squeeze bottle. But Liquin, it's fast drying. It dries kind of glossy in some areas when I'm using it. And also, the thing that I like about Liquin is that it gives me enough time to still work in some paint in some areas where it's that kind of area where it's a bit tacky but a bit dry. I find that's my best area of working when I'm doing my portraits. So Liquin, start off with this. Another thing too, it doesn't leave any streaks or yellowing. So that's something else that you won't have to worry about when you're dealing with Liquin. As you get more advanced, go ahead, get the Stan Oil, and you can look into things as in mixing your own recipe for your painting medium. Next up, you're gonna need a brush cleaning tank, well, jar. This is made by Silicoil, and when we pop it open, we have that coil in there that you run the bristles of the brush over, and it will get it clean before you have to clean it with your linseed oil soap. Now with this is odorless mineral spirits, which is the Gamsol in here. So that's why I said the Gamsol plays an important part in your starter kit. Now, if you want to know how to use this and the maintenance involved, go ahead and check out this video. Now, next up is what you see in front of you right here. It's a glass palette. This is a tempered glass palette. And what I like about it is that it's so easy and effective to clean up after I'm done my painting session. Now, what I use is a glass scraper. So you'll need that to get the paint off. And you'll also need some industrial paper towel. However, if you have some old clothes, some old t-shirts, which I'm sure everybody does, you can go ahead and use that to clean off the palette, clean the paint off your knife, and also clean the paint out of your brushes. Also, a palette knife. Palette knife is very important when mixing your colors, so you're definitely gonna need one of those. Man, listen, I found a palette knife at the dollar store for $2. So they don't cost much. You could get your hands on them very easy. Next up, you're gonna need some brushes. These are my Treckle brushes, and I'm just gonna recommend 5 for you to use. For your starter kit, I'd say start off with a flat, start off with a round, start off with a smaller flat, start off with a smaller round, and for your details, I like to use a script brush for my fine details. Now, the reason why I say start off with these is that there's many different brushes out there. And sometimes it can get complicated. When you're looking at all these brushes, it can be overbearing. You don't know what to use. Start out simple, see what you like, see how your paintings go. And then if you feel that you want to graduate up to different techniques, or you just want to try different brushes to see if it will work better for your results, then go ahead and buy them. There's all types of brushes, blender brushes, there's fan brushes. Keep it simple. Just go with these 5 and start painting. However, if you're a person that has already been painting, let's say you're coming over from watercolor or acrylics, go ahead and buy a whole new set for your oil paints in the same exact style as your other paintings that you were doing with your other medium. That's what I did. I pretty much bought a whole new set and I matched the set that I was using for my acrylic paints. Now, you're gonna need a surface to paint on. If you're completely new to painting, what I would suggest, even some of you that aren't new to painting, but you're crossing over into oil paints, what I would suggest, just for a tester, just for a feel of the paints, just for a feel of your techniques and what you're comfortable with at first, get you a canvas pad or work on the smaller canvases. So work on something like a 9x12, work on something like an 11x14. Don't jump into these big canvases because you're gonna get a lot of headache. You're brand new to this medium. What's important is that you find an area where you're comfortable, you kind of get in your swag, and now you're ready to go and work on the bigger pieces. Work on some smaller pieces first, maybe do some studies on the canvas pad, on the smaller pieces of canvas. Now, a lot of you might have heard about the fat over lean rule and how to follow it, which is basically working from thinnest paint to thickest layer. Here's the cheat code to all of that. Do alla prima. Alla prima is paintings that you typically do within 1 to 2 sessions, 1 to 2 sittings. It's wet into wet, and you don't really have to worry about that fat over lean rule. Next up, we got Gamvar. Now, Gamvar is a varnish, and what you're gonna wanna do when your painting is done is put some Gamvar on it. This is gonna protect your painting, and also if you get the gloss like I got here, it's gonna give it a nice look to it. It's gonna make everything nice and even, and it's gonna give this nice gloss coat over it. It's very important that you protect your paintings, and with Gamvar, you don't have to wait 6 to 12 months like traditional varnishes, let's say like a Damar varnish. You don't have to wait that long with Gamvar. Gamvar can go on right when it's dry to the touch. The only exception is if you're doing something like impasto painting, which real quick is just laying down thick layers of paint with like a palette knife. That you're gonna have to wait a bit longer. Typically for me, I usually let my paintings sit for maybe about 2 weeks. So here's a quick overview of everything that you need. Scraper, palette knife, about 5 brushes, Cerakote tanks, Gamvar. You'll need some gloves. You'll need your primary colors, your cyan and your magenta, your earth tones, your white, black, everything else. You'll need your Gamsol and canvas paper or a small canvas. So there you have it, guys. Oil painting kit made easy. I know it can be overbearing. It can be a bit intimidating when you first get into oil paints, or if you're thinking about getting into it. There's so many different things. Here, you just have some simple things that you'll need to get started, and then you can start working on things such as your techniques and what type of style that you're gonna go with. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Make sure to like and subscribe. Peace.